Welcome, everyone. I will now call the meeting to order and remind everyone that if you do have an electronic instrument, that you would shut it off so it doesn't bother the rest of the audience, please. Ask if there's any conflict of interest amongst the council members. No? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Adoption. You want to?
Yep.
Looking for the adoption of the published agenda for this evening. Councillor Vogt, supported by Deputy Mayor Malash. Okay. Any additions, sir?
Yes, Your Worship, I have one item that I wish to add to the agenda and have the minutes reflect my report from the last closed meeting that Council had. November 10th, Council met in closed session pursuant to Section 239, 2C and E. And at that November 10th closed session, an update was provided with respect to an ongoing litigation settlement matter. And Council provided further direction with respect to a proposed disposition of land by the municipality. Land that was identified as 7173 King Street West at a prior regular council meeting when it was declared as surplus. And that's the extent of my report coming out of that closed meeting.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Snively?
I'd like to bring up a notice of motion tonight on outsourcing work, drainage work, and whatever. I'd like to bring that forward.
Thank you, sir. Anything further? Okay. All in favor of the motion? Motion carries.
Item 4 on the agenda is adoption of minutes. That the minutes of the November 7, 2016 regular council meeting be adopted as circulated.
Moved by Councillor Caxero, supported by Councillor Bjorkman. Any questions? All in favor? Motion carries.
Item 5 is public presentations. Item 5A, our first public presentation is Jake and Caroline Oliver speaking to council concerning flooding issues on Bryan Avenue West, west of Gosfield Town Line.
Okay. Mr. Oliver, welcome. And you push that purple button on the top and it should start her going. Yep, good.
Okay, thank you. My parents were here as were supposed to be here as a delegation as well, but they're both ill, so therefore they won't be here. We're here tonight to speak about a flooding issue. Every time it rains, there's a heavy rain on Bryan Avenue East. The whole street becomes heavily flooded. This is just west of Gosfield. So much so that the drains will not take the water away until many hours or the next day. We've been flooded in each of the last 3 years and no longer have flood insurance. Water on the road, as you'll see in the pictures in a moment, can be 12 to 13 inches in height. Over the past several months, I've been writing and sending pictures to council. Perhaps I wasn't doing it in the right way. It wasn't until recently that I learned that none of the pictures I provided were ever seen by council members, so we wanted to take a moment to show you those pictures this evening and to tell you a little bit about our situation. This is directly in front of our home. The road, as you can see, is flooded. It's creeping up to the tree area and getting pretty close to our doorway. In the past, the town and the fire department have had to come to the corner to actually close the road off because it's so heavily flooded. And there are drains there. There are 3 of them, but they don't really seem to work. You can see across the street. Is it possible to hold that picture? like even though it's heavily flooded in front of our home, and that's in front of my parents' home, across the street, again, just west of Gosfield, I mean, they could be cutting their grass there. So it's quite puzzling. I'm not sure why that is, but all along the street, across the road, down the street, it's all green. And, here we are with this heavy flooding. It's difficult because when it rains, we really can't go away. We have to stay home. And we have to get additional pumps out, just to be ready for it. In years past, we never really had this problem. It seems to be more in line with the time frame of the development of the new school. I don't know if the development had anything to do with that, but it's just a time frame. That seems to be the period where this really began, and the flooding has occurred pretty much every year. We've complied with the flooding survey, and we've added the additional pumps, and we've had town officials come out and with good advice. Since April of this year, we've been asking Mr. Nepsey to look into the matter, as it is quite serious. And recently action has been taken. Camera and vacuum crews were out. A month ago, Mr. Nepsey stated that more detailed work would be done the following day, and that he would provide an update, but I guess he hasn't received that update. I don't know, but we haven't heard back from him since that period. That was a month ago. On a more positive note, we appreciate what the town is doing. Sending the vacuum crews out, the trucks, trying to find out what the problem is. And I guess our big concern is that the problem has yet to be identified, and we're wondering what a solution might be. As a result of the problem, damage is being caused to our home. So that's the long and short of my presentation. My question is where we go from here. Oh, I forgot. My parents, in the letter that they wrote, they just asked that I read it in their absence. It was addressed to the town. Could someone please tell us what is being done to keep our home from flooding? During the past several years, we have been flooded 2 to 3 times each year. So this is 2 to 3 times each year, because the water on Bryan East, west of Gosfield Town Line, has nowhere to go when it rains. Ever since the development of the new public school, we get flooded with every rain. They do receive more flooding than we do. I understand you are planning on fixing, this letter was written back in May. I understand you are planning on fixing Bryan Avenue East, or east of Gosfield. However, it is our opinion that is not where the problem is. Please go to the 2 pictures we have included. Our question is, why are you working on the other end of Bryan when the flooding is so severe in and around our home? My husband Fred is 89 years old. I am 91. It is a horrible feeling to see the town doing nothing to assist us after all these years. We are growing tired of hiring people to come in and fix things after each flood. We can't afford to keep making these kind of repairs. So, pardon? Yeah, that is my parents' home right there, and that is one of the flooding pictures. And again, you can see the neighbors right next door, and it's all along that street and across the street. Everything is absolutely fine. But if you could go back just one more. But yeah, either one of those 2 pictures. I mean, you can see how deep it is, and it's all across. It pushes over to the schoolyard. It covers their sign nearly up to their front steps, nearly up to our front steps. So That's it. I said all I wanted to.
Okay, Councillor Snively?
Through your worship to Chris, when we did did we do camera work over at that drainage in the drains there, and did we do some camera work? And what was the results to the camera work we did? Are the drains working properly over there?
Okay, we'll go to Mr. Nepsey, Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Through your worship, yes, we did. I've had several discussions with Mr. Oliver, and I think he summed it up with the word puzzling. This intersection does flood. Probably one of the first ones in the area to hold water. But as we discussed before, just because there's water flooding on the road doesn't mean necessarily that water should be flooding in your basement. And Mr. Oliver and I have had this discussion several times. I know he's dealt with our building department, and he's done a lot of the right things that we ask residents to do. So kudos to Mr. Oliver. And I also understand, you know, that fear of once you've flooded, you always know when it's going to rain and whatnot. So we have focused quite a bit of investigation in the area, both sanitary and storm. The results have been uninspiring. The results, you know, it's that whole, similar to the rest of the flooding issues we're having in town, there's not you know, the golden goose kind of, that's it. You know, there's no aha moment, and in particular in this intersection, there's no aha moment here. There's, you know, the water does leave, sometimes after, yes, several hours, depending on the intensity of the storm, but it does leave. So that to me, there's no blockage. Nothing in the cameraing indicated any issues. There's some, you know, some minor buildup, some minor roots, but nothing unlike any of our sewers in Essex or Harrow or Colchester. We've also gone and done additional camera work that I received a summary today that I'll forward to Mr. Oliver with respect to his own personal connections. And there's no indication of any severe issue. You know, there are some joints that are separated that's allowing some inflow and infiltration in, but which would ultimately allow water to, you know, if those pipes are surcharged, would allow water to get into the clear stone around the pipe. But again, nothing that's not uncommon to most homes in the area. As far as where do we go from here, I think, you know, council has approved the stormwater model, which is in the final stages of being finalized. But it's at the point where we can start testing scenarios and we can start looking at solutions to these obvious pinch point areas. And maybe from that, I'm hoping it might indicate to us what capital works need to happen there, and not knee-jerk reaction. But, you know, it might say, hey, we have to twin the storm on Bryan West, or we have to, you know, do something, or maybe the model's going to say, you know, it's not showing anything. So, but I guess I think that's next step is wait for the storm model to be completed and see if the indication of a restricted area is in that, you know, is showing in that intersection, and go from there. Unfortunately, like many of the other flooding residents, I don't have you know, the answers that Mr. Oliver is looking for, and we're you know, plugging along and you know, trying to see if there's something we can do that would make sense and that would be effective.
Further, your worship, to Chris again. So, in other words, we could be looking at, would that tie into our drainage system that we're presently putting in now?
Through your worship, no. What we've improved on Bryan West is the sanitary sewer, not the storm sewer. Although, I mean, theoretically, it probably will help lower the hydraulic grade line in the entire area, as we seem to get a lot of stormwater in our sanitary sewer system. But no, the road flooding is a result of the storm sewer system, not the sanitary sewer system. So the storm sewer model, which is, like I said, being worked on, may point to some capital improvements that we can make, throughout the town, and in particular in that intersection.
Just one last
Sure.
thing, Your Worship, if I can address Mr. Oliver. Have you actually, the last big storm, has your house actually flooded inside, or no?
Yes.
It did flood inside after, okay. So I think, to Chris again, I think this is something we got to look into, and I don't think probably the Olivers are the only people in that area that's having that problem. I think it's probably,
It's
Hey.
our,
I wasn't aware of that situation there, to be honest with you. I thought, it was
Yes.
the first I heard of that area there, to be honest with you, but I think this is something as a town administration like Chris, his department can look into it and bring back recommendations to the council how we can improve that one intersection there, the affected area.
it's a horrible intersection, and as Chris said, it is the first, or very close to the first, to flood. We've never seen it like this in past years. Even with heavy rains, the road just never was covered in water, and now we've got like 13 inches. So I'm just really puzzled as to what would cause that.
Well, I think as council, if I could give direction to Chris's department to look into it, and let's move forward and see what we can do to improve that area there. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Vokes?
Thank you, Your Worship. In terms, if I could direct myself to Councillor Snively, in terms of looking into it, we've actually, Chris, I know Chris has been on this file. I've been on this file actually since I had the opportunity to visit the Oliver's house, where upon arriving at their house was in a deplorable state as a result of the flooding. There's no doubt about that. You can't deny that. But we've been working as diligently as we can, myself and Chris, on this file. Unfortunately, we haven't come up with an answer. But with that being said, Chris, when the time is right, I was just wondering if you could maybe update council on how far away we are to the ribbon cutting, if you will, of the completion of the updates we're pursuing. The storm we had where most of the flooding had occurred, where actually I had received at that time 128 calls in total between text messages, emails, and phone calls. I compound 128 calls. I got to ask you, Mr. Oliver, if I could, and I'm not knowledgeable of this, and as I say, I'm working on this file, but I'm certainly not knowledgeable on it. When they got flooded in Tecumseh and we got that significant rainfall, in your reference, in your reflection of flooding to Councillor Snively, when he asked the question of flooding, did you also flood during that rainfall, your basement?
No, we were fully prepared, and we
Okay.
had additional pumps.
So the
It
actions
The flooding this year was back in March.
Okay, so I guess with those comments being said and those questions being answered is I really would like to have Chris, if he could, address how far we are from conclusion of the project, because the reality is that if at what is perceivably as a conclusion of the project and the project completed, and that road and that intersection is still flooding, and I hear the scenarios or the logics of, well, if it's flooding, that's good because it's not going in your basement. Flooding's flooding, and it makes people nervous, and I don't like seeing it. So once we do that, I would suggest that we have to go in and find out why that intersection is flooding like it's flooding. Just not forget the flooding aspect in terms of basements. I'm talking about people going through that intersection when water is a foot deep at 40 mile an hour with a 4x4 Jeep. Those type of scenarios, they're not safe. They're not good. So if I could turn to Chris, if you don't mind, Chris, if you could maybe fill council in as to where we are with our current project, please.
Okay, Mr. Nefsey, Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Through
You
your
can
worship.
answer Councillor Vokes, please.
Yep. This sanitary sewer improvements on Bryan East are completed and have been completed for the better part of a month or two now. So the sewer works that you have on this side of town, the west side of town, are not complete. They're constructing the diversion chamber at the sewage plant right now. The force main's complete. The restorations are happening today. I saw them ripping out the old sod that died last year in any areas that they needed restoration. They're also milled the road, and asphalt is destined to go down Thursday because the weather is supposed to be a scooch warmer, which is what you need for surface finish. But those works really don't impact Mr. Oliver. Those are more the West End works. The sanitary improvements, again, are more for the sanitary sewer system and not for the stormwater system. Although tied, because the rainwater seems to be getting into both, and definitely the sanitary sewer enlargement on Bryan will assist, taking water in and lowering that hydraulic grade line. It is complete. As I noted before, I think the next step now is we've cameraed every pipe in that intersection, whether it's storm or sanitary. The next step would be to wait for the model and see, as a bigger picture, why is that area getting pinched? Is it elevations? Is it because it's, as far as the network goes, the lowest spot in the area once the water, when it begins to rain, is that area the first one that's impacted, which may be something, but that's until I see that model and see how it all is working tied together, I really don't know. And that to me is what that next step is. There is no pipe there that I can't look at. Until this model comes out, I really don't know what else to do right now.
Councillor Vokes.
So in talking to the model, if you will, in timelines, what will we be looking at from now to the prudence of the model to reinvestigating the intersection if the model fails?
Through your worship, I was hoping last month, so I'm pushing the engineers to get it out as soon as possible because there are some other scenarios that I could use it for right now. So they know it's a priority for me. Realistically, I'm guessing, within the next month or two, probably working ready to go, first thing in January, realistically. So.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to piggyback on the conversations we've already had, if the model shows that there's something directly that we can do to improve this location, how would we fund that? Because that's the question, right? It's going to come back and say we can do A, B, and C, but then where does the money come? Does it come from, do we have, stormwater reserve, or do we have to look at something in our budget in 2017? I think council needs to be aware of if we need money, we need to figure out how we're going to fund it.
Through your worship, that's something, that's a baited question there, but it depends on the severity of what needs to be done. If it's as simple as adding a catch basin here or there, or maybe a small section of pipe. We do have storm sewer reserves. Again, depending on the severity of the work and the complicated nature of the work, it may not be enough. So it would be something that would come back to council, and I guess we'll go from there, basically.
Thank you. Councillor Bjorkman.
Thank you, through your worship, to the Olivers. Thank you very much for coming tonight and speaking to us. I know it's not easy always to sit there and try to explain what's happening. Further to the other discussions going on, as members of the IRCA board, Councillor Snively and I have been working with them as well. There's a comprehensive stormwater plan being enabled for our entire county. And although it's, far afield from us and the ditches, those kinds of things are going to help us as well. Right now, everybody works in silos, and Essex does theirs, and LaSalle does theirs. Leamington does theirs. What we're learning is that all of this affects all of us. So along with those works, what Mr. Nepsey is working on in town, hopefully, I believe he said we were only a couple months away from having that particular study done as well. And that will give us some more tools to find ways to get this water moving. The main thing is to keep it moving. And obviously what's happening is the constriction in your area. But it's just another process that's happening that hopefully will be positive for you.
Mr. Nepsey?
Through your worship, I just wanted to clarify. I threw maybe an unfair jab at the engineer, but the reason that the model is late is in order to do the modeling, you need rainfall. And if you recall the summer, we had probably the driest summer we've had so we had to extend the length of time we had our flow monitors in there in order to get enough usable data that we could use to create the model and test it and whatnot. So that's part of the reason, or that's the reason they're telling me anyways, that they're behind, but definitely a fair reason, especially with the summer we had. So.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Councilor Vokes?
Thank you, Worship. So I just want to get an understanding, and I'm sure the Olivers do tonight, in terms of the steps and the timelines to those steps. So they leave here tonight with the understanding of the timeframes and how it will roll out as to their concern. So the anticipation is that the engineers will, around the first part of January, Chris, will have the model completed. Your anticipation is. And then once we have that model completed, the model can be reviewed by yourself and the engineers. And then once the discoveries are made of that, if there's nothing that relates to their intersection as found in that model, then you would come back to council for further direction. Do I understand that right?
Mr. Nepsey?
Through your worship, I don't know if I'd come back for further direction. I think we'd really have to sit with the engineers and we'd have to think about what our next steps would be at that point, and maybe in parallel we're doing that now, and I'm pushing them now to say, while you're developing this model, think of some reasons why this is happening, and do we extend the camera work much farther down the system and see if there's issues? We have cameraed quite a bit of the town, but maybe we start to push that bubble farther out and see if we can just start eliminating things, right? So we've concentrated at the intersection. There's no issues anywhere else that would lead us to believe that, but we'll just start crossing things off and see what road that takes us down.
Further, if I could. No pun intended, Chris, but yourself, obviously, and the team you're working has done a great job in mopping the town up. And so, but my only concern at this point is that in terms of water gathering, if you will, or water concerns, that's the only residue left of the storm challenges we've had. So I want to make sure that I heard you say to Councillor Bondi, as she raised a concern about financing, I really would want to make sure that there is opportunity for financing there if we have to move forward with another initiative to enhance that intersection to control that flooding. And if not, it would have to be talked to in budget deliberations coming up in the next month or so, because I wouldn't want to come into May where the model shows nothing, the water problem is still there, and now we don't have no money to act on a resolution. So as long as the money's there in terms of reserve, or however we can get it, and we know that's there, in the event the model fails, that we can still move forward as a town and resolve this problem.
Councilor Kexer?
I think if Mr. Oliver doesn't have anything else to add, just receive his presentation, and certainly we're not going to let this go. Obviously, we're going to act on whatever Chris brings forward. Hopefully there's a resolution to it, whether it be increasing the capacity there or upsizing the pipes or whatever.
Okay, so before you make that motion, Mr. Oliver, any final comment to make?
No, I just wanted to ask Chris, with all of his experience, I just wanted to know if there was any guesstimate or assumption, any wild guess as to why we would go from, up to 12, 13 inches of rain on the road when we've never seen that before in past years. Any kind of hunch at all, Chris?
Mr. Nepsey?
Through your worship, I don't like throwing around hunches in council chambers, but I've heard that statement a lot over the last year and a half, and I'm sure council has as well. I've never flooded this bad. I've never seen the roads this bad. So, are these events worse than people can remember? Maybe, right? I think, I know, prior to that September 11th flood there, people in Tully's Meadow never flooded. So I think the type of rain we're getting has a lot to do with it, and I'll blame nature, I guess.
Councilor Caxero,
I'll move receipt of the presentation.
supported by Councilor Bondi. Questions? All in favor of the motion? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Your worship, our second presentation this evening, or delegation, is Mr. Larry Warch from 294 Leicester Street, coming to council to advise that he supports the no parking signs on Leicester Street to remain as currently situated.
Mr. Warch, welcome, sir. If you want to go to the mic, we'll be able to hear you, sir. You just push that purple button on the top there, and the mic will work for you.
I'm here today because a request has been made to remove no parking signage from Leicester Street to allow visitors to homes in the area to park in front of our homes when our garages and our driveways are full. I will not tell you that I am here to represent all of the residents on Leicester Street, just me, my wife, and my mother. The petitioner from November 7th, 2016 does not represent me, my wife, or my mother. It is not the town's responsibility to provide visitor parking in front of any home. Ours is affected too. We have found alternative parking besides the on-street legal parking across the street, the on-street parking around the corner, which is available to anyone who wishes to park there. At times, we have needed extra parking too. There is always the on-street parking. We have knocked on a neighbor's door and asked to share that driveway for a couple of hours. We were granted permission. A little communication with a neighbor was all it took. We have also parked at the back of the church parking lot behind our home. About a year ago, when my father died, we had an overflow of visitors and vehicles. Oh, excuse me. The church parking lot was just steps away from many of the homes that say they have adversely been affected by the no parking signs. My wife and I walked to the pastor's house and asked if occasionally our visitors could park at the back of their lot. He said, yes, you can. The residents who live on Leicester Street have used the back of our lot for some time now for parking. Because of simple communication, we found more legal parking just steps away from many of the homes that say they are affected by the no parking signs. I know these signs are in place to first and foremost keep one side of the street open for easy access and operation of fire trucks, easy open access for service vehicles and snow plows, which have left extra snow for me and my wife to remove because someone left a vehicle parked in front of my home during a snow event on more than one occasion last winter. I used a shovel hooked through my walker to push snow from my driveway. Cars have, on a regular basis, parked on adjacent sides at the same time, causing us to walk to the center of the road while getting our mail or just walking the neighborhood with my mom. The street accommodates pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicle traffic, with parking allowed on one side only right now. We have no sidewalks. There have been parking disputes in this area. We have asked for a vehicle to be moved once ourselves. The other party was, let's say, very verbal when asked to do so. This problem continued, so I called the town office about it. They said it was a police matter. The police came out, and the police officer eventually had one of those cars that were parking adjacently move from the no parking area. He said the signage was very vague. His report would be sent to the town, and he asked me to call them, you the town, with my concerns. 2 hours later, the owner of the vehicle that was moved yelled threats across the street, escalating the problem. I had to call the police again. If you need to know more about that, just ask. These issues, I called and discussed these issues and asked for clarity on the vague signage issue so the police could know where the signs mean no parking and where it ends. I left it with Mr. Nepsey, who toured the area. Councillor Vokes and Councillor Bjorkman also took a look, and I understood that they felt the parking should remain on one side only. For all of the reasons Mr. Nepsey gave you and for my safety concerns for me and my family when we walk, sharing our street with vehicle traffic and parked cars, I ask that the no parking signs be left as is. There are close by alternative parking spots. It just took simple communication to find them. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments from Councilor Bjorkman?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, Mr. Wirsch, thank you very much for coming and talking to us tonight. We had the presentation last week, and we asked our administration to prepare a report to investigate it further and prepare a report to remove the no parking signs on the east side of Leicester Street. In that report, we'll have the pros and cons of that happening. I want you to know that as we spoke earlier and as I spoke with Mr. Nepsey at the time, I agree that there should be no parking on one side of that street. It's very narrow where it makes the turn coming into the cul-de-sac for emergency vehicles, and now I did not consider earlier the fact of no sidewalks and having to walk on the street, which is just another way to make sure that people can get around in their own neighborhood. So I will support that when that time comes.
Okay. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you, through your worship. I did pay a visit out there as well, just to check it out, and I came to the same conclusions as Councillor Bjorkman. It's very narrow, and again, without the sidewalks there, it seems reasonable to have one side that where you have no parking. I think for winter control too, the administration made a good case for this, and I would agree that there should be no parking on one side of the street. Thank you.
Councilor Bondi?
Thank you. When the time is right, I'd like to make a motion to accept the presentation. What I wanted to say is your points are great. I think it's awesome that you came out and you're defending yourself. It's unfortunate that you feel bullied in your own community when you're thinking of safety and livability. As soon as I read your email, as soon as we got it, I didn't read it right away, but I read it a couple days later, and I was like, wow, that's really good, valid points. It gives us, another perspective on the issue. Had you not sent this, I wouldn't have thought about all of the things in the letter. So I just want to thank you for coming out and sharing with us your point of view.
Thank you very much. Anything further? Councilor Bondi?
Motion to receive the presentation?
Supported by Councilor Caxero. Any questions?
Receive and send the feedback to administration to include in their report.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Anything further to the motion? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, sir. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Your Worship, our third presentation or delegation this evening is Mr. Dan Crutch from Landmark Engineering, here to provide an update concerning the Colchester Harbor Condition Assessment Report. This presentation is also in conjunction with Community Services Report 2016-038, which has also been provided to Council this evening for receipt.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, Mr. Crutch. Yep, little purple button. Thank you, sir.
Can I have the presentation up on my screen here? How does?
Hang on. Mr. Crutch, could you just hang on for a second? We have, I think, Mr. Sweet, Director of Community Services, wants to make a comment.
Your Worship, before Mr. Crutch begins, just wanted to give a brief update to Council that in March of this year, this is the first step going towards divesting the harbor from Department of Fisheries and Ocean. So the step was to get an assessment. We've gone over the report that Dan presented to the Colchester Harbor Steering Committee, so they have seen this. And we thought it was important that Dan comes and does a brief presentation to Council to see where the harbor is. So that is intent why we wanted Dan here before Council today.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Okay, Mr. Crutch.
Okay, sorry, Doug, I jumped ahead there a little bit. Okay, prepared this presentation as a highlight of the outcome of our assessment. Basically, what we did on behalf of the town was undertake an examination of the facility, and with the purpose of identifying deficiencies, issues, things that you should be aware of, with the understanding that the town is going to consider a divestiture of that facility from Small Craft Harbor, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, to the town. So this slide basically just summarizes some of the things that we did, and really the presentation summary here. I'm going to go through the scope of our assessment, what some of the findings of that assessment were with regards to the main pier, the breakwaters, floating docks, service docks, parking areas, basically all the facilities on site that are major items in terms of maintenance potential and cost. Some recommendations for repairs. We looked at specifically something that has been looked at several times in the past, and that's the configuration of the perimeter protection around the facility. And then we also examined a couple of traffic flow issues and had identified some improvements, and then I'll just touch briefly on next steps. So the scope of the assessment, we reviewed background reports, we undertook some site inspections, looking for structural issues with the facility. Again, we've made some recommendations for some of these features. All of the features that we've basically focused on are identified on that small map, prepared some cost estimates, and then again, strategies for moving forward with approvals if council so desires. So the history of the facility is part of the reason why the facility has some of the issues that it has. The original pier was built in the early 1900s. The perimeter protection wasn't part of that initial construction. Breakwaters were added gradually over many years to enhance and expand some sheltering effects. And as a result, the harbor really doesn't have the configuration that one would expect if you were building the facility from scratch with the purpose of allowing for vessel moorings. So some of the known issues, the excessive wave action on the interior of the harbor under certain wind conditions, and then there's a lot of sand and sediment accumulation at the entrance, as well as permeating into the harbor itself. That pier was examined, so I'll speak to that for a moment. It's generally in reasonable condition given its age. It's kind of a composite of old construction overlaid with some newer concrete. There are some minor defects visible, but overall it's not in bad condition. It's not unstable or in risk of failure in the foreseeable or even projected future. But we do recommend that the owner of that facility should be given consideration to either major repairs, significant repairs, or replacement of the concrete deck that's over top of that pier in the next 5 to 10 years. The perimeter protection, the breakwaters, they're generally in fair condition. There is some minor settlement and loss of rock that we noted. The size of the structures are not substantial. If you were building it in today's standard, I think one would consider building them wider at the top. So they tend to be a little bit peaky and narrow. So any loss of rock is immediately visible, and you end up with some wave inundation during high water level periods. We're also considering a reconfiguration of this. If somebody were to repair this, we don't recommend that they be repaired in their current alignment. There's warrants to consider relocating some of those to improve the performance of the facility, but also increase some of the berthing capacity. We examined all the docks, and again, there are various vintages, and some are showing more wear and tear than others. The docks we've identified floating, or the dock A as being in very good condition. It's, I think, the newest. Dock B and D are probably looking at something in the shorter term in terms of replacement, and dock C is something that isn't in too bad a condition, and again would probably need something in more medium term, maybe 5 years down the road. We also examined the service dock and the boat ramps and things that are on site that provide all the necessary auxiliary services to the users. All those components were found to be in good condition. The only issue really relates to the function of the boat ramp, which I'll speak to in a moment. Again, looking also at the parking areas, the upper parking area and access road are in fair condition. They're showing a little more distress. The lower parking area seems to be in pretty good condition. Again, probably needing some resurfacing of the entire area over the next 2 to 5 years potentially, depending on how they continue to weather. We also looked at the service building to a small extent. We didn't do a complete structural examination at the facility, but we did note that the access ramps and stairs are needing some attention. I understand that council's addressing that probably separately, and also the roof of the structure is going to need replacement in the next 2 to 5 years. It's an asphalt shingle roof, and it's showing its age. So now, just touching on one of the major issues of the outcome of this study, previous studies have looked at reconfiguration of the basin to really focus on reducing the wave action inside the basin during predominant wave events. This is a diagram that was taken from the last report that was done. I'm putting this up here really as a reference. We also are recommending and would consider, recommend that the town consider planning to reconfigure the perimeter protection if it was to take over control of this facility, but we are suggesting something a little bit different. Again, it would be subject to more detailed examination, but we think there's merit in what we're proposing. That is realigning the breakwater on the west and moving the entrance basically one step over across from the what we refer to as the south jetty, or that little spit that sticks out. And if you're going to do that, we recommend that you would realign that breakwater as shown by the dashed line. It could be reconstructed, I suppose, more or less along the existing alignment, but we think if you're going to go through the expense of doing this, there would be merit in relocating it. When you do that, again, some of the problems with the perimeter protection, you have two problems. The wave action that's getting into the harbor, but you're also getting a lot of sand that's migrating through the core of that structure, probably because it wasn't constructed with an impermeable core that would hold back the sand or the finer materials. So these are two illustrations in the report that just show some alternatives. The one on the bottom is something that we would recommend if you opted to reconfigure that facility, as this next image shows, where we're actually employing a steel bin type of a breakwater and then facing it with rock. That would allow you more mooring capacity of larger vessels on the inside of the harbor and still provide you the perimeter protection on the outside. So this is really a concept plan that we just put together just to show you what we're talking about. Again, that barrier to the west of the entrance would be the two like a composite type of a barrier instead of a full rock structure. It would be more like the pier that you have there now. And then concentrating the docking on the west side of the basin, allowing the wave energy that comes into the basin to dissipate up on that beachy type of a feature that fronts the properties to the north of the facility. Another issue that we found seemed to be a big problem when we observed the operation of the facility is that there's a lot of different competing traffic interests down there. There's the people wanting to launch their boats, people that are visiting or coming down to the beach, and then just pedestrians who seem to just, it's a free-for-all, everyone's going in different directions. So if you were to take over this facility, we would recommend you give consideration to reconfiguring the lower part of Jackson Street so that you provide a more proper turnaround and a little better improved circulation through the lower part of the site. And again, I can answer any questions regarding this at the appropriate time. Finally, we attempted to estimate, guesstimate, whatever you want to refer to it as, provide you with some order of magnitude costs that you should be considering if you were to take over this facility, what you'd be looking at in the short term based on those items that I've identified, some dock replacement, some asphalt repairs, and then some of those traffic flow improvements. We're looking at potentially $700,000 in the short term. In the more long term, with a more substantial reconfiguration of the basin and some of the other repairs that we noted, probably another $4.5 million. So it's not and I'm sure everyone here isn't going to be completely surprised, it's not an inexpensive undertaking if you were to take over that facility. I'm going to open it up at this point to questions, and thanks for the opportunity to make this presentation.
Okay, I have one question for sure, and it goes back a number of years, and it's going to be probably to Mr. Nepsey, Director of Infrastructure and Development. Going back, I don't know, 6 or 8 years ago, and further than that, we've been trying to get the government to make the improvements needed to turn this over to us. I'm going to say 6, 7 years ago, Port Stanley had this work done, you know, and our representative at that time told me, Essex is next, Colchester Harbor, you're going to be the next one. Had a couple meetings with the man who's not there anymore, but nothing ever came about. So now that we have this report to Mr. Nepsey, do you think there's any chance that we take this report, take it to the government of the day, and see if we can't get them to get off their behinds and do something with this harbor that's going to make it beneficial for us to take it over? Because everyone knows we don't have that kind of money, you know, to rearrange the opening of the marina and everything like that. So do we have a shot, you think, to take this and go to the government of the day? I don't think we've ever talked to them yet. And like I'm not part of that committee, you know, I think Councillor Snively and Councillor Caxero are, and to see what the heck we can get done here, you know, before this term of council is over anyways. So that's a question for Mr. Nepsey.
Through your worship, I'm going to defer to Doug Sweet, Director of Community Services. He's got better history and a better answer than I have.
Okay, but you've been around longer, so that's why I thought I'd go to you. Mr. Sweet, please.
To your worship, I've been around twice, remember? Through your worship, that is the next step. And the full report that Landmark Engineering has provided to do an environmental assessment, but with the Harbor Steering Committee, is to go to Department of Fisheries and Ocean with his report to start getting a plan in place on terms of funding. You did mention Port Stanley. One of the barriers or challenges we've had is that is a commercial fishing, where we're more residential, the tourist type, and that's what the challenge we have. But that is, we needed this report to actually have something in hand saying this is a condition, this is a cost. We do know that an environmental assessment is next, and we're hoping we get funding from that as well. So,
Thank you very much, sir. Councillor Snively.
Through your worship, I had conversations with our local member of parliament, just recently on this issue, and as a committee, I've talked to Doug on it. We're going to meet with her, and I know the federal government they want to get rid of these harbors, and they've been wanting to get rid of them for years. So with the change of government, hopefully there is some funding that will be freed up to take over these harbors. So that's what as a committee member, that's what we're looking at for this meeting, and Mr. Sweet, Doug's going to set that up, I guess, next week sometime, and we're going to meet with them and see what can be done there. But like I say, the federal government does want to unload these harbors, but we'd like to see the improvement first, and then we take over the harbors. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Councilor Bondi?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To our delegation, I pretty much grew up on the harbor. My parents live up there, and so the conversation has always been, you know, the configuration of the opening of the harbor. So I had always thought, and I'm not an engineer, but I will get heck from my parents if I don't ask, that the west arm of the harbor would be the one, like it would kind of, right now it goes like this. This is the east, right? And this is the west. The thought was always that because the nature of the waves and the storm, that the west arm would go like this.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Does anybody know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually have
You gotta get
the
it. You speak,
presentation,
Sherry.
so let me go back.
Yeah, A-B-B-B-I. Just.
I know exactly what you mean.
Do you know
but
what I mean?
There's the harbor, and so right now what's happening is
He knows.
the way the entrance is configured, you're exposed to the predominant wave direction, which is out of the southwest, and you're sheltered from the less frequent but more substantial wave event, which is from the southeast or from the east. So the configurations that have been proposed in the past attempt to reduce that exposure from the southwest, and that's what this image is from a report that was done. I don't remember the date of it, but it was within the last 5 years or so, I think. This is intended to reduce that wave action during the predominant wave event. My concern with this is that I think this exposes you to a more severe, less frequent event that could actually create, damage to some of the structures inside the basin, and or a really uncomfortable experience for somebody if they happen to be mooring during a strong east blow. So you can't protect against everything perfectly, but I think what you have to do, and this, if I could go back and provide some justification for this, what we're doing here is two things. People that have been visiting this harbor for many years have been used to approaching it from a certain direction. If you just overnight change that direction, you're going to introduce a little bit of confusion to the boater, especially somebody arriving at night that hasn't visited your harbor for several years and isn't familiar with the changes that you've undertaken. This attempts to preserve the approach direction, so from a harbor and safety perspective, I think it's preferred. Also, this, I think, achieves what you need to in terms of providing sheltering from all wave directions to the main boating docking area, and it allows the wave energy that comes in frequently, but also not with as much magnitude, to dissipate up on that natural beach feature on the inside of the harbor, which I think is ideal as well, so you get less reflection and other things. So this study wasn't aimed at proposing a change and focusing on that, but we couldn't help ourselves but to say maybe you should consider something else as an option, because I have some concerns with what I saw with what was being considered in the past, right? I don't know if that answers your question, Councilor Bond.
Yes. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, and thank you. Now I have an explanation that was helpful. It is very logical to change the pattern of the opening too much in terms of visitors that we have, coming, who knows, every 2 or 3, 4 years. So that makes sense. And I think if we are going to put money into it, I would love to see some improvements to the opening, because as it is right now, it's very dangerous. Thank you.
Your Worship, if I could just add one other thing, I think I was trying to race through this because I know you have time limits and everything else. So the small craft harbors is reluctant to provide a lot of funding for improvement of facilities, as I understand, but they are willing to fund repairs. So one thing that I have spoken with Mr. Sweet about is the possibility of maybe a reconsideration in our report or an amendment that would help you with your negotiations, and that is justifying that existing perimeter protection, not only its alignment is inadequate, but it's not substantial enough for the long term. So maybe they'd be willing to fund beefing the existing perimeter protection up to the degree that you could, rather than rebuilding it, just take those funds and undertake to realign and reconfigure the facility with those funds, right? You may have to put some dollars up as well, but it would be better bang for your buck, and you may be able to justify to the feds that they need to make this investment to bring these perimeter protection walls up to a more appropriate scale or state. We looked at their condition. They're not in bad condition, but they're not real substantial, right?
Thank you, sir. Anything further? Councillor Caxero.
Through your worship, the only thing I'll add is we also, I believe, have received back a preliminary report from a university group that was working on a business plan also for us down in that area. So that also is another tool that will be available to us when we go to the ministry. So it'll be this, an environmental assessment, and that business plan. And I think those three documents together are what are going to provide a very good case for us to show that it's needed, and that they're going to have to come up with a way of getting the money to fund it, I think, and then they can relieve themselves of the asset, and we're more than willing to take it on as long as it's in a viable state.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Snively.
Thank you, Your Worship. Did we look at water flow into the harbor itself? Because you know what, if you looked at the condition in there, the growth from the bottom up of weed, the weed growth in there, didn't the existing wall have culverts in there where water flowed? Are you aware of that or no?
We didn't find any culverts through the wall within the scope of what we did, but if we did or if we didn't is really, it wouldn't matter. In my view, when you have a basin that is going to be create the environment that's suitable for mooring vessels, which is a low energy environment, immediately abutting a lake environment that has active coastal processes, you're going to get sedimentation and you're going to get weed growth inside that basin. The little bit of current that you could introduce or turnover of that water through those culverts would not in any way, in my professional opinion, mitigate that weed growth. I think the only way to deal with that is the way that you are dealing with it, and that is periodically, mechanically cutting it and removing that material, because when you have no wave energy and you've got the water depths that you have, and you're right adjacent to an active coastal zone with sedimentation and everything else, you're going to get weed growth in those basins. I'm not aware of one that doesn't have that.
Okay, thank you. I thought that would help with a little bit of movement in there.
Yeah, not enough energy to create an environment where those weeds wouldn't, or that plant material wouldn't still thrive.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything further? Okay. Councillor Caxero. Motion.
Motion to receive.
See, supported by Councillor Bjorkman. Any questions? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very in-depth report.
Your Worship, our last delegation this evening is Mr. Stephen McKenzie, Chief Executive Officer from the Windsor-Essex Economic Development Corporation. He's come here this evening to provide an overview of the 2016 activities. Just prior to the meeting this evening, some additional publications from the Development Corporation were handed out to the council members, including their Q3 report, which provides highlights from third quarter activities.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, Mr. McKenzie. Pleasure to meet you, sir. That purple button on the top. Right.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. It's nice to be here.
I think what I'd like to do is just, as a review, I'm sure for most of the council, draw your attention to the first handout, Windsor Essex Economic Development Corporation. It's a two-sided handout. It provides a brief overview of the corporation and the different services that we undertake on behalf of the entire county. I guess what I would point out there is full-service Economic Development Corporation with robust programs in the business retention and expansion, business startups and fostering entrepreneurship, and business attraction, and that this is supported by marketing department, which supports the departments and also does marketing outside the region for us on a national and international basis. And I thought I would jump right to some specific data for Essex tonight. Excuse me. Our business retention and expansion department has been very busy in Essex in 2016. We have a total of what we call touch points, 44 touch points, which means contact with 44 companies or entrepreneurs. That's just by the business retention and expansion department, and there's been 12 actual on-site visits out here so far this year. Companies that we have worked with include Selleck, Essex Weld, Agris Innovation, Paglione Winery, I hope I'm saying that correct, North 42 Degrees Winery. There's a number of other ones. I would draw attention to Cooper's Hawk Vineyard. Tom O'Brien is a new board member of ours, so you have a good representation there. The business, small business center, very active here, and certainly one of the main reasons is because we actually have an office here. Our only satellite office in the county is located here in Essex with the Business Resource Center folks, and it's been a busy year. Inquiries from Essex so far this year, 589 inquiries to the office. It has resulted in 113 consultations with startup companies or folks looking to start a company, and 56 consultations with companies that have already existed, for a total of 169. Very active on holding workshops and informative workshops here. There's been 10 so far this year. And as of Friday, we have 122 active files in Essex, in Greater Essex, and that represents about 15% of our active files throughout the county. So very involved with Essex, with Nelson coming on board. He has engaged with us right away. We have a good relationship there, and I look forward to even accomplishing more. Lori Brett, your communications officer, has got a great relationship with our communications officer, Lana Drouillard. Again, I'm fairly new, but I'm pleased to report that Essex is well represented in the Windsor Essex Economic Development Corporation work plan.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Any questions? Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for coming, and I have to say, what a difference a year makes. So it's quite refreshing, not only for Windsor and Essex, but also for the town of Essex too. We have Nelson is a great addition to our staff here. I have just one question.
Sure.
Provincially certified investment-ready sites. Are you familiar with what is the minimum site-specific?
Yes, there's actually an event tomorrow at 11 o'clock. I think it's at the Caboto Club, where the folks from the provincial ministry are coming down to provide the overview. I think it has been reduced to 10 acres, but I would have to double check that. That's my briefing packet that's still on my desk for tomorrow morning. But they have, that's part of what's going to be outlined tomorrow, and I'd be happy to follow up tomorrow with an email via Nelson if that's the best way. But that's part of what they're doing is they have reduced the size And so that's going to create some more opportunity. I think it's to 10 acres.
Thank you, and I would love
But
follow-up.
I will definitely follow up via Nelson on that.
Perfect, thank you, that would be so helpful. And thank you for your patience tonight, to now you've got an education about Colchester Harbor too. So if it ever comes to be, you can advocate on our behalf that we want divestiture too. Another thing I would love to keep on your radar is the town of Essex and other local municipalities have had issues with the county of Essex in signage, in wayfinding signage. And now I don't think you can have something directly to do with it, but I think it's something that should be on your radar, that the municipalities need help in lobbying the county for signage. And I don't know if our planner at some point can sit down and fill you in and let you know with what kind of issues we're having. But if you're coming from Windsor, it's really important that we're able to market ourselves out here, and signage has always been a problem. I've been on council, this is my 6th year now, and we've been talking about signage for 6 years. So any help that you can do, to spread the people out and to get them mobile and moving throughout the county to all the municipalities would be very helpful as well.
Thank you.
We'd certainly do whatever we could there. I know I'm thinking immediately of the regional tourism group as well, that, especially if it's about some of the sites and some of the tourist attractions that they may champion it. I'd be happy to check with Mr. Orr and see if there's anything going on there as well.
Good. Councillor Vokes?
Thank you, Worship, and thanks for taking the opportunity to come here and share your positions with us. I just wonder if you could, as you know, the town of Essex is built on the foundation of small business. As a matter of fact, I think we struggle sometimes to compete with the Walker Road development, certainly out more towards Division Road. It's 10 minutes there, and those challenges are always before us, and it certainly, I believe that has a lot to do with our empty storefronts in the town of Essex. With that being said, if there was any entrepreneur interested or anybody interested in starting a small business, what opportunities are out there as of speaking and presentation tonight in terms of programs? I haven't had the chance to go over your literature that Mr. Auger handed to us to review. So my question is, what programs are there to help a small business, and what funding is there to help start a small business, if you could, please?
Thank you, sir.
Sure. Good question. I'm pleased to say that there really are some comprehensive resources available to help small business, especially in the county. And again, having the office right here makes it much easier. And when I mentioned the 10 programs, the 10 events, those in fact are workshops to help companies that are exploring the possibility of starting a business from soup to nuts. I mean, how to do the legal work, how to do marketing. We have a series of professional presenters that come in, plus our own staff. So there are programs available. The number one funding that we are involved with is called the Starter Company Grants, and it's a program sponsored by the province and that we implement it for the province, for the entire county. And entrepreneurs, if they fulfill the requirements, I mean, there's a program and there are activities that they must follow over a series of months, and they are able to receive up to $5,000, and usually in allotments, for the first phase. If they do the first phase and requirements, they'll get $1,500, for example, and then as they move through it, they get their $5,000. So, and those companies, if your office is approached or your constituents are approaching you, send them to our office with the business resource folks here in town. They will go over criteria. This year, the money has all been allocated. We are waiting anxiously to hear from the provincial government to see how much will be allocated for 2017. We hope it's the same, and so as I said, one thing, it's not just a city, Windsor
program. This is available to all entrepreneurs that qualify throughout the region.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything further? Councilor Bjorkman?
Thank you, through your worship.